Well, I appreciate you all tuning in. I'm Jack Driscoll. This is Becky Luzier, and she's with the Black Hawk Family Relief Fund. Becky, thanks so much for allowing us to get together and communicate some of the programs and what's happened as of recent floods and what your group's all about.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to do so. I think that most people don't know much about us or didn't know much about us until the flooding occurred a couple weeks ago. So this is a great platform for us to get a lot of information out to people and kind of get them a little bit more informed about what we have been doing, what we're going to be doing, and who we are.
What started all this with your group?
So the Black Hawk Family Relief Fund actually started last June. So we've been around for a year. I'm not surprised that a lot of people never heard of us. We're a small group. There was only 5 or 6 people. And I'm the head girls lacrosse coach at Bethel Park High School. I've been there for 10 seasons. And last spring, we had 2 families in the girls lacrosse community in Bethel Park who experienced some sudden and what we believe were, felt were catastrophic medical situations. Okay. And as a girls lacrosse community, because we have the high school, but we also have a middle school program that goes down through 3rd grade through the rec department, we felt like we heard a lot of people saying, I want to do something to help. Oh my goodness, how can we help? And sometimes you want to help people, but you don't necessarily know how to go about doing that in a meaningful way. And I felt like if we could take all the people who are saying individually, I want to help, and put us all together in one space, that would allow us to be more effective and maybe produce a greater piece of the help puzzle for those families. So we started in May, and we planned a pasta dinner, which was about 3 weeks out from the day that we decided we were going to attempt to help this family. And we solicited donations from the community, businesses for raffle baskets. And we did pasta, salad, bread, eat-in, takeout with businesses that supported us through that. And we sold tickets, and we did 50-50, and we did, that auction for the baskets that we had put together, and we raised approximately $3,000.
Wow.
So we took $2,600, set that aside, and we split it into 2 checks and paid that out to those 2 families. And we only left really the money that was left in there thinking, well, we want to have something in reserve in case something happens. What if there's, a neighborhood fire or whatever? And we, really didn't necessarily promote beyond that. That was when we set up our Facebook page initially. But we heard some offers from people over the few months after the pasta dinner to do a fundraiser to benefit the fund, or how could they help us, but nothing ever really panned out long term. We had originally thought maybe this would be an annual fundraiser. We just do something once a year. That way we always have money in the fund.
Yeah.
And this past June, so last month, early in the month, I had said something to several of our members of our board and said, hey, if we think we're not going to do anything else with this, let's just go ahead and dissolve it, because we did, file for a tax ID number. We did register as a nonprofit entity with the state of Pennsylvania. We had a checking account, an email. And I said, if we're not going to do anything else, that's fine. We did something great for these 2 families, and it's okay if that's all it is. And, if nobody wants to continue with this, let's dissolve and let's kind of move on.
And when was that?
That was probably, I would say, maybe 2 weeks before the flooding occurred.
Wow.
So I said, let's keep that in our, back of our minds. Think about it. See how you feel called to react to this possibility of closing. And then let's, kind of reconvene. Everybody's busy. We're all going on vacations. It's summertime. So we can talk about this in the coming months, but,
right.
We may not be needed
right.
anymore. So we thought. And then, of course, the rains came, 2 weeks ago yesterday, and nobody looked out the window and thought it's raining really hard, and now all of a sudden the fund is going to mobilize.
Right.
So I was actually out that night, and I drove through an area of Bethel that I know became, very hard hit by the flooding, but we drove through it, I would say maybe 10 or 15 minutes before the surge, so to speak, that came from the water. So when we'd been home for like 15 minutes, and that's when all the sirens started. And even then, not having mass flooding visually on my street, I was thinking, oh, there's been an accident, you know, or a lightning hit a telephone pole, or, you know,
Right,
something's
that's what
been
I
struck
thought.
by lightning. You know, what happens sometimes when you have a terrible thunderstorm.
Right.
So I really, even at that moment, didn't necessarily, like a lot of citizens of this community didn't realize how bad it was in that moment,
Right.
what was happening with the surge, or even still what it was like Thursday morning when, you know, we all woke up.
Right.
So, you know, we first saw a young woman by the name of Elizabeth Pagano, who owns Hunter Spring Farm. That's a family-owned and operated horse farm. It has been for 30 years. And she was the first story I saw posted on Facebook of people saying, oh my goodness, I flooded out. Like, is everybody okay? And she's the first person who I saw really saying, no, I'm not okay. You know, my farm has been really adversely affected by this flooding, and I don't know what to do. And we came to know that she had walked all of her horses out in the dark in the floodwaters to get her horses to safety because her barn was filling up.
Okay.
She is in the military reserve, so it doesn't surprise me that in a moment of where a lot of people would have panicked and not known what to do, she
Right.
kept her wits about her and stayed focused on the mission, which was to get her horses to safety, at least in the interim, so she could deal with whatever was coming after. And that's actually the first person that we really became aware of. And even in that moment, Jack, I really thought we were going to have, you know, a small handful of people who maybe live near a creek, who had experienced a little bit of I'm from the East Coast and grew up at the beach, so we call it a storm surge, like, and I don't know what that's the proper terminology in this situation, but we really thought that we were going to have a few people who had experienced this storm surge of water, and, you know, maybe a couple different groups could adopt these few different people and you know, help them out, and then, you know, we'd kind of all be over
Go
and
on
done
our
with
way.
this.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that's where we first initially stepped in. That's why the first fundraiser that we were even affiliated with, or I think kind of you know, married up to in people's minds, was the fundraiser that occurred at Hunter Spring Farm just a little over a week after the flooding on a Friday, because that was the first person we found.
But it's interesting with what you say, where you didn't even realize, even like the next morning. I'm the same way. Thursday came, I held appointments all day long, nothing changed, did life as usual. Friday, same thing, and late in the day, my daughter's the one who came to me and said, hey, Dad, there's a lot going on in Bethel. A lot of people were flooded. We have to do something to help. And I looked at her and said, what? What? I don't know anything that's going on. What are you talking about? She said, it's all over Facebook. What turns out what she meant was your group and the Citizens of Bethel Park. And I didn't know anything about it, but because of your two groups communicating that, it became immediately evident to everybody on the Facebook, and I think not at all evident to the rest of the world out there. We had a serious problem with some citizens, and all the rest of us didn't even know about it.
Correct. And the Citizens of Bethel Park Facebook page was probably even more so out in front of this than the fund was. I think our fund page on Facebook, the number of people that follow or like us has probably, you know, tenfold increased since the flooding occurred, because that first post about the farm was on the Citizens of Bethel Park Facebook page.
Okay.
So that's where I first commented and reached out to her via, you know, private message on Facebook to say, hey, Elizabeth, this, you know, my name's Becky. This is the group that I'm involved with, and how can we help you? What can we do? And to be clear, Elizabeth was not asking for money. She was asking for labor. She was asking for people, you know, that could come out and help her dig this out. Because, you know, just like everyone else who experienced the flooding, they had a lot of mud and debris where it didn't belong, and she had nearly everything wash out that was in the ground of her barn. So any gravel, any footing, any sand was gone. So that was, you know, that Citizens of Bethel Park Facebook page, and their moderators were the first ones who kind of realized something was happening, and let's try to help connect people. So people were posting on the page that they needed help with volunteers. People were posting that they would volunteer and trying to connect them. That was what was mostly happening on Thursday. I think as the day went on Thursday is when I at least started to realize that this was more widespread than we thought it was. But still, again, realizing that there was widespread affected properties is different than realizing the degree to which any of those properties were actually compromised by the flooding.
Right.
So coming from Thursday into Friday, I had started, communicating with the fund's board of directors about what's going on, and this is a little bit bigger than what we thought it was, and kind of simultaneously interfacing with them and making sure that they had access to the same information I had about what was going on in the area, but also at the same time interacting very closely with these two moderators of the Citizens of Bethel Park Facebook page, Sydney Litzenberger and Lauren Bradley, and they were really connecting a lot of people. Now, I did not know Lauren before this experience.
Okay.
Sid, I know because we have some, her niece and I are friends, so I knew of her, but I had not really communicated with any of these women prior to this. And now, fast forward into Friday, I had received a call from some representatives. Different representatives called me at different times from the Bethel Park municipality. Both the Bethel Park Community Foundation had reached out, and Tim Mowry, the president of the council, who wanted to kind of get a little bit more information on our fund, because they believed at that point that it might be the only organization in Bethel that was actually set up from an organizational standpoint to receive donations for families and then get those donations out to families. Because as you can probably imagine, a lot of large foundations don't necessarily do checks to individuals or to service providers, carpenters or whatever. They more so give money to groups, civic groups, organizations, clubs, that sort of thing. So there was this idea that anyone who wanted to make a donation should be donating to the fund because we're the only ones in the position to get those donations out to actual affected families, which I immediately agreed to because I felt like they were probably right based on what I knew about how our fund had functioned in the past, and how could we not agree to become that, for our community based on only what I knew on Thursday and Friday, which was still widespread affectedness, but maybe not the degree of people being affected. And then Lauren and Sid and myself were joined by another woman by the name of Courtney Smith, who kind of came on and said, I want to help coordinate getting things places. There was an immediate interest in the cleaning supply donations, getting them out to people, providing opportunities for families or people to donate those supplies at locations beyond the fire department and get them to the fire department for sharing with the public. Courtney took the lead on all of the donation jars that you'll see in local businesses. Right now we have 20 jars out. They're about to come in, so they've been out for 2 weeks, and they'll go out to 20 different businesses because we felt like, and this was all Courtney that made that sort of, she kind of thought through and said 40 jars is too much because everybody wanted a jar when we started to figure out what had happened. So we'll do 20 jars, and then we'll bring those in after a couple weeks and send them out to 20 new businesses so that we get in front of new, groups of people and customers who might want to donate. So she's been handling all of that. Lauren actually lives abroad. She's from Bethel Park, but she lives in London, England currently. So she's been really facilitating all of the I need help and I want to help and connecting those people together. We also had some women who volunteered to run point on meals. So they were collecting meals from people who wanted to make food to donate and then getting that food out to the families. So that all really started to take shape, I would say, in the 48 hours after the flooding. And then
that's fast.
Yeah, but I mean, don't underestimate the ability of a group of women to get things done when their community needs them. I've seen that firsthand. There was a willingness to help by this core group of people initially to just become the conduit between the victims of the flooding and the people who wanted to help the victims of the flooding. We've seen a lot of people who maybe said, I can't go dig mud out, but what do I have to offer? And that's where a lot of the meals have come from. Women in our community, older women, senior citizens, for example, who maybe say, I can't physically go clear debris, but I can bang out 10, oven loads of rigatoni and meatballs,
Wow,
and I
nice.
can get them out. If you guys can get them to people, I can make them.
Yeah.
So all of that happened, really quickly, and Tim Mowry had, with his affiliation with the Historical Society, had secured the Schoolhouse Arts Building for us as a location for people to come and get the cleaning supplies, bring the cleaning supplies. Also, great, donate to the fund.
Okay.
But when we said we were going to act as the group that you could make the donation for the flood victims, to be honest, I didn't know even what that would mean in terms of an actual dollar amount. We were more concerned at that immediate point of being an organizer of information and a connector between those that were affected and those, that wanted to help them. So, then we get to Sunday, we set up the collection at the high school, which I have to thank Dan Sloan, the athletic director at Bethel Park High School, because he was in it immediately when I was expressing that I needed a central place to do a donation drive, to accept more supplies for the fire department, because the fire department wasn't going to open on Sunday. That I needed permission to do that. We needed a place where we could set up, where traffic could get in and out easily. And, he was very quick to reply and say, just set it up near the athletic fields. Like, that's our area of purview. We can do what we need to do up there at the athletic field. So that's what we did. And we left the athletic fields when we were done with our collection. I think we did 1 to 3 or something like that. And we took the gift cards that had been donated at that collection out to families that had been affected. So this was actually my first time on Sunday getting from behind telephone, email, running around that we were doing, and actually getting in the communities, because by then we knew of particular streets that had been hit really hard. There'd been enough information exchange by that point for us to know some places that we could target for those first gift cards. And we went over, our first stop was Greenwald, which is off of Logan, at the bottom of Logan as you get to Bethel Church, and we turned onto that street, and it took your breath away to see the destruction in front of you on that street. And it was house after house after house that had huge piles of debris at their curb that they had already pulled out. So much property pulled out into their front and backyards trying to dry things out that had gotten wet. And that was a moment for me, because I knew we had people that were affected, maybe more than we thought. Let's gather some money and gift cards. Let's see if we can connect the volunteers with the people, that need help. But the level of damage, I don't think that I appreciated necessarily until I saw that. And I talked to several homeowners that day who were in the process of cleaning out, who were, I think, probably in a state of shock at that point. They were actively cleaning up their property, still coming to terms with what they were up against, what had actually happened. It was a humbling experience to see that we were a part of an organization that was, or we were representatives of the help, and then seeing the people that you were helping, in that moment with the volunteers and the meals and that sort of thing. So we went to several houses. My husband was with me, which I think was just very lucky on my part, because I think he helped me to keep it together for that, 45-minute walk around that neighborhood, because every single house had experienced such damage that it was difficult to talk to even one of those homeowners and not just feel so awful for what they were experiencing, and that you couldn't do more in that moment to assist them. I talked to, but it's interesting, because in that we're kind of at a ground zero type of location for flooding in that moment, but you still have citizens that are very reluctant to take the gift cards because they're so concerned that there might be someone else who's in a worse position than they are. So there was one woman in particular that I kind of had to argue with her a little bit, that you really should take these. She kept saying, well, I don't want to. There could be others that are worse affected than I am, and saying, ma'am, I'm here looking at what you're experiencing. I can't imagine someone who needs it more than you in this exact moment. And her daughter happened to come out of the garage at that point. I guess they had just gotten their garage open for the first time because they had water in it. Pressure against the door, which made it difficult to open. A lot of people experience clogging of their own drainage out of their house because of all of the silt and mud and stuff that came in. So it wasn't draining. The door, they couldn't get it open for the pressure. You know, the electrical systems in these houses had been compromised because of the water, so it wasn't like you could just push the button and open the door. And her daughter came out at that point and convinced her to take one of the $25 Target gift cards that I have, convincing her that they could use it for cleaning supplies or, you know, garbage bags or whatever. So, you know, that was like a moment of realizing just how focused our own citizens were on each other and not wanting to take something away from someone who might need it more when in reality this woman needed it pretty bad. In that moment, I talked to another family that was cleaning out, and basically they said, you know, you're the first person we've seen besides our neighbors. Like,
is that right?
Yeah, that have, like, we haven't seen anybody yet. And I'm not saying that to, you know, be critical of any sort of, you know, a managed or emergency response situation, but the devastation was so widespread that I can understand how somebody, you know, in a polo shirt with an emblem on it hadn't been there yet.
Right.
But they and they very well could have been in that neighborhood, and that family just didn't see them or wasn't, you know, outside when they came around. And that's been a lot of it, at least for me, going out and trying to share these gift cards that have been donated with families that have been affected. Sometimes it is a little bit of the luck of the draw. You know, we're aware of who's been reported by themselves or a neighbor that they've sustained serious damage, but I am going and knocking, you know, on 3 or 4 doors on a particular street at any given date or time. And I want to physically see a person to hand this card to them because I don't want to just leave it behind. Because, of course, we have our own, you know, internal data about where we've put those cards and that sort of thing. So some of it has been, you know, I might have gone to a house and knocked on the door and no one was there, and I've tried to stop back a second or a third time. So that was sort of the immediate response of what took place. And yes, the donations did start. We got the GoFundMe up and running, which we've hit our $5,000 original fundraising goal.
Well, explain that. What is GoFundMe?
So GoFundMe is an online platform that allows just about anyone who wants to set up a fundraising campaign online. So you make your payment, you make your donation. If you have access to the internet and a credit or debit card, you can do that in about 30 seconds. So it's a great opportunity for people who live outside of Bethel Park, who are aware of our plight as a community, whether because they're a friend of someone who can tell them, or they just come across it because of some of the media attention that's, you know, we've gotten. They have the ability to make the donation that way. We also have the ability to donate cash or check in person at any Citizens Bank location by telling them that you want to deposit to the Black Hawk Family Relief Fund. Black Hawk is 2 words, just like the driveway that the high school sits on. We were all sports people when we formed this a year ago, so that's where that comes from. And so that's in-person cash and check. We have an online ability to collect money. And then if you're interested in making gift card donations, we're asking now that the gift cards are more centered on providers that can replace appliances, service appliances, install appliances. So yes, there's Home Depot and Lowe's and those kinds of places, but if you want to support something local, then all we need would be a gift certificate from a local plumber or whatever, a letter saying that they are offering $100 of services, whatever that is, however, you know, they want to communicate that donation. Those can all be dropped off at Bethel Park Presbyterian Church on Bethel Church Road. From 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. And I want to thank that congregation and Reverend Kathy. They were the first church group that stepped up and contacted me to offer a sizable donation. And they've challenged, I think, other parishes in the community to get involved and to kind of do like a little church challenge. How can you collect money for the fund? And Reverend Kathy's checked on me several times and prayed with me to make sure that we could all get through this together, type of thing. So that's, you know, that's kind of where things started. And we got that, like I said, we got the GoFundMe up pretty quickly.
Now, let me ask you this. When they do the GoFundMe, Are you a 501c3 organization?
That's a great question, and I think that this is a great opportunity to share some information about that. So when we formed a year ago, my background, I own a Bethel Park-based sporting events company. It's all girls lacrosse. We're the largest provider in the region. But what part of that is managing Intrepid Girls Lacrosse Club, which is the only nonprofit girls travel team in the area. And that gave me a background in the understanding of how nonprofits work on a basic formation level. I mean, obviously the day-to-day operations are a responsibility as well. But that's why when we set up, we made sure that we filed our paperwork with the state properly, that we would have the proper distinction as a nonprofit group. Now, we did not file 501c3 status, which is a federal distinction, not a state distinction. So that's it's an IRS, moniker, I guess. And that process is very expensive, usually over $1,500 just to get that moving.
Right.
And at the time a year ago, I don't know that we really felt that was something that we were chasing in terms of a large, charitable organization. We were dealing with this particular need. We wanted to address it. I, from a business standpoint, wanted it to be set up in a way that allowed us to build on it in the future if we wanted to. And if we didn't, it also allowed us to dissolve it in a more efficient way than having a federal, the federal IDs involved. So that's how that started. We have not applied for 501c3 status yet. It is something we are interested in doing, but to be honest, in the last 2 weeks, we would not have had another moment in the day to deal with something that wasn't actually advancing the relief effort forward.
So you could use some help from someone who's skilled in
absolutely
developing a 501c3 designation, and
correct.
Anyone who's listening or watching that wants to help, that could be a fantastic way instead of picking up a shovel, that you could help a lot of people there.
Correct.
I will share this with you. You're lucky it's 2018.
Yeah.
Because since it's 2018, the new tax law that came in that passed, our current tax code says that 501c3 for most of us we no longer care, because we can't deduct charitable donations anymore for the most part, whether they're 501c3 or not. We're just donating. Here's why. The new tax code, the Tax Reform Act of 2018 that is in effect now, means in order to deduct a charitable donation from your personal income tax return as a charitable donation, you have to exceed the new standard deduction for a married couple is $25,000. That means your mortgage and your property tax and all your charitable donations and medical expenses, itemized expenses, have to exceed $25,000, or you don't get any tax deduction at all. Whether it's 501c3 or not, it doesn't matter. The government's giving it to us automatically. So now 501c3 no longer matters. We make charitable donations to a 501c3 organization this year. We make those same charitable donations to a non-501c3. It doesn't matter. None of it's deductible unless we exceed that threshold. So you'll see $24,000 listed on some. If you're a senior, you'll see $25,000, maybe even $26,000. None of us are getting over that as a rule, which means none of your donations are tax deductible. We're back to, they gave that to us automatically. So give from your heart, because you're already getting the donation credit. Even without giving the donations, they give it to us in the standard deduction now. So it really no longer matters to most individuals.
And I think that's really helpful to know, because what I have communicated to people throughout this whole thing, when they would ask about the tax ramifications of their donation, was whether we were a state registered nonprofit corps or whether we were a 501c3. I can't speak to any individual or family tax situation to be able to give you a blanket statement about what or wouldn't be deducted. So we've seen several silver linings in all of this stuff, but maybe this is an opportunity for people to get a little bit more educated about their charitable giving and what comes along with that on the back end in form of taxes.
They basically took it away, so it no longer matters. on our taxes, which is huge for everybody, really.
Correct.
So you'll see the basic standard deduction went up to $24,000. Then if you're a senior, you get an extra $1,000. If you're married seniors, it's 26, and there are different amounts there. But they just took it away. We don't have to itemize our houses anymore, property taxes or charitable donations.
Correct. And I think the 501c3, at least for us in the long term, is going to be more important in terms of corporate donations.
I agree.
So, for example, Target has stepped up and has actually jumped over their own internal hurdles about 501c3 giving because they wanted to help so very much. Right. So, we're not a 501c3, but the Target Corporation wants to be a part of helping in Bethel. And I've been kind of playing phone tag with a representative from that for the last couple of days. The holiday, everybody's out. So we're going to be hearing more from them about how they're going to be assisting us. We did receive approval from the Bethel Park Community Foundation. I do have access to a letter on their behalf that can be shared with anyone who needs the 501c3 distinction. And then that money would be then filtered down to the fund. Mm-hmm. Anyone who's interested in just any information or getting access to those particular kinds of letters, we have a couple ways to communicate right now. One is our Facebook page, and it's just going into the search bar at the top of Facebook and typing in Black Hawk Family Relief Fund, and our profile picture is the Black Hawk. So that's how you can find us. You like that page. I get a notification anytime anyone likes a page. It is a public page, but you do have to like it in order to see our updates popping up in your news feed. So that's how we are based on social media. That is our only parked sort of area for information right now. We are in the process of getting a website up and running. Again, the last 2 weeks have been crazy, and we just haven't had the time to allocate to these sorts of things, but we're focusing on them now. We're kind of shifting into phase 2 of the relief recovery efforts from the point of view of myself, the moderators of the Citizens of Bethel Park page, the fund. So Facebook, we will have a website. You can also email us, and it's just the fund's name, completely written out, no spaces or symbols, Black Hawk Family Relief Fund at yahoo.com. So those are kind of how we're getting the information out right now. And we've been working with members of the municipality, I want to say daily, it's almost hourly at this point, in the last 2 weeks, communicating very regularly with different representatives. Let
me ask you a question. Would you be willing to come back on another show and help talk about this a little bit more and what events and activities you're putting out there so that we can maybe get some more involvement from the viewers and the listeners?
Absolutely, and I think the most pressing thing in terms of upcoming events is tomorrow there at the community center, so Friday, July 6th, from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., there is what's called a MARC, a multi-agency resource center being set up, and that is an opportunity for victims of the flooding to get access to a lot of faith-based charitable organizations that will be there talking about the resources that they have, the help that they can provide. The Black Hawk Family Relief Fund will not be at that event. We're kind of letting these other organizations who have much larger, broader support infrastructures in place, step in and get some more information to our citizens. We're not going anywhere. We're going to continue, to work. I have been trying to get the information out pretty consistently that our application process for relief funds will not begin until the municipality concludes their damage assessment, which I think will be happening probably around the midway point of this month. They'll be completely done with that because we need that data to have a true understanding of which properties were the most affected by the flooding so that we can work on getting the funds out to the people that need it the most. Our organization, the Black Hawk Family Relief Fund, from when we were, brought together and the way that we wrote all of our paperwork, said that we were focusing on people experiencing catastrophic emergencies or family events, medical, whatever. So we really do have a duty, per the way our fund has been set up, to focus on those most adversely affected by the flooding first and foremost with those dollars that are coming in. And we really will need the damage assessment to be completed by the municipality for us to be able to start identifying those who are applying. But when that time comes, we will get the application out. It will be available for download on our website, on our Facebook page, and we will also place it for paper copy pickup in a municipal location, and we'll make sure that we get that information out through the different routes that we have when that time comes.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for letting us get together and get this information out. Absolutely. So we'll be back. Watch for the next segment, and we'll go through some of the detailed programs available and some more about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.